لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وأزواجه وذريته أجمعين. We're going to look at some of the comments um, on Imam Ghazali's videos. We have been a series we have been making Imam Ghazali's types of reason, and it is still going on. We have I think so far 21 videos in the English series, and we are not finished yet, and the average length of a video is 30 minutes. Already 6 hours long videos on in English, and there are, I think, at least 1 hour long videos in Urdu as well, which we have just started. But this comment which we have received is from excerpts, from an excerpt, and the purpose of excerpt is to just give a taste of what we are doing to those who haven't been following us. If they are interested, they can follow the full sessions if they are interested. So it's a bit disappointing that the video is from the comment is from Dr. Zahid Siddiq, and this is I'll put a link under this video, but the comment is on an excerpt which is 9 or 10 minutes long, and it's entitled Reflections on the third and fourth types of reason in the Ghazalian Al-Ghazalian classification of types of reason. And from the comments, it seems that Dr. Zahid hasn't watched other videos, so he's just guessing from this segment, this short segment, what we might have said in other sessions. And I don't mind it. People can say whatever they want. I have personally, and I'm looking in this comment as well, in order so that just to see whether there are issues on which I can think these comments can, if there are issues in these comments which might help us to think about some of the things we have been thinking about. So personally, I don't really care whether Dr. Zahid Siddiq has misinterpreted me or Imam Ghazali. It doesn't bother me, because when I look at different authors, for example, Kant, or Habermas, or even Imam Ghazali, I look at their work in order to develop my own thinking. It doesn't bother me whether I have got Habermas wrong or right. Obviously, it does bother me that I have tools to understand them, and I'm not attributing to them something which they haven't said. But I've said it at various places. My main task is to develop my own thinking, and if I look at Kant's work or Habermas's work, I try to get them right, obviously, but that's not my main concern. So that's why I don't get into debates about what Habermas meant by what he actually means. Similarly, I don't get into debates about what Imam Ghazali actually meant and in which book he said what. That's the first thing. So this would be a bit of reflection on how we read different authors and things like that. The second thing about our these sessions, which some of them we upload on YouTube, the method of this session is that we reflect on certain texts, and sometime it is successful, we come up with some better understanding of that text. Sometimes, we end up with more questions than answers, and sometimes we might not understand the text very well, but it might help us to, it might generate some other issues and ideas about which we are able to think something which is worthwhile. But the main thing is we take this text again in the next session, and that's how it works. And so it's an evolving reading. It's not something static. So that's why reading is not focused on getting someone right, because we're trying to develop our thinking. And there's nothing more harmful for the development of thinking than the fact that you are lost in words and you don't understand the concepts as your own, part of your own thinking, or in the context of your own thinking. You're challenging your thinking, you develop it, you add to it, you subtract it, and this is an ongoing process. And this is just a first reading. So when we just a couple of weeks ago, we started that in Urdu. I won't say totally different, but we have already, in Urdu session, we have already talked about things we didn't even touch in English session. So that's how it is, because there's no preconceived ideas about what Imam Ghazali said, and because we are really not concerned about who said what, but we are concerned about ideas, and in the context of our own thinking, and and developing our own thinking. Okay, so that's the second point. The third thing is when we read an author like Imam Ghazali, who lived around 1200 years ago, probably approximately 1200 years ago, we should differentiate in his writing between his knowledge as Islamic scholar, knowledge based on his understanding of the text. And obviously, the text itself has gradation. I'm not going to go into that at this point. But an important thing is his understanding is constituted by the knowledge, human knowledge of the time, whether it's his logical knowledge or philosophical knowledge or scientific knowledge or psychological knowledge. This knowledge evolves with times. A lot of what Muslim scholars say become obsolete. Even what a genius like Imam Ghazali says. So there's always, it's important to, when we are reading the Imam on subjects like, reason, it is important to differentiate between these two aspects. So the conception of reason which he has derived from the text, even though even that is fallible, but it has totally different status than conception of rationality or conception of reason he derived from his understanding of non-revelational human knowledge, especially the knowledge derived from non-Muslim sources or dubiously Muslim sources, etc. So we need to update, the concepts and the technical terms, etc., etc. Okay, so these are few general remarks which I wanted to make before we go to the text of the comment, which we'll do now, inshallah. Okay, let's read the comment in its entirety and then go through it line by line to see if we have anything to say on it. I believe that the third meanings are not well specified in this video. The reason seems to be that the word mujarrabat or mujarabat, I don't know what word is that, is not followed in other writings of Imam al-Ghazali like Mihak al-Nazar and Mi'yar al-Ulum. Both of these are his books on logic. Okay, one detail while the other is summary. Which one is summary? By mujarrabat or mujarrabat, Ghazali means inductively generalized knowledge. Mujarabat seems like Mujarabat of Eastern medicine. He contrasts it with hissiyat. Hissiyat. What is hissiyat? Which refer to particular experiences as against general experiences. The video says that the third meaning also belongs to the first two types, which are unacquired, as per Al-Ghazali. But Ghazali explicitly writes that the third and fourth ones are acquired. Once we understand what Al-Ghazali means by mujarrabat or mujarrabat, which is his third meaning, it becomes clear why he calls it acquired. Well, basically, I mean, the short answer is I never actually denied that the third one is acquired. So, in that sense, the whole comment is superfluous. But we might be able to, discuss a few things. So let's go through the comments line by line. Okay. Before we go to the comment, let us reread Imam Ghazali's actual words, so that people don't put their own words in his mouth. So this is the third type, and we spent a lot of time on it. Imam says, "Ulumun," the third meaning, "tustafadu min at-tajarib." So he's not saying mujarribat, he is saying tajarib, which is the plural of tajriba. بمجاري الأحوال علوم تستفاد من التجارب بمجاري الأحوال فإن, and this is important, فإن من حنكته التجارب وهذبته المذاهب يقال إنه عاقل في العادة. So the context makes it clear what he's talking about. And ومن لا يتصف بهذه الصفة, and he means the sifa of فإن, so that's what he is referring to, the whole thing. فإن من حنكته التجارب وهذبته المذاهب. So whoever is not characterized by these, he is known as Ghabi and Ghumr and Jahil. And we spent time on Ghumr as well. And Ghumr also makes it clear what he means tajarib, meaning of life experience. And then Imam says, فَهَذَا نَوْنَ آخَرُ مِنَ الْعُلُومِ سُمِّيَ عَقْلًا. Okay, so it's very clear in Imam, the context. So before going to other books, and we'll talk about that, first read the text which you are reading in its context. And we did follow the text, all our discussion was based on Imam's own text, and we used it to develop our own thinking as much as we could. And normally I don't do it, but when I was doing it, I was also following Imam Zubaydi's commentary on Ihya. And my reading is generally, in congruence with or in accord with Imam Zubaydi's reading. So that's the first thing. Okay, so now let's go back to the comments. So I'm just going to go up line by line and see if I have anything to say. Okay, so let's go to the comments. This comment is started with, I believe that the third meaning is not specified. I don't know what does it exactly mean, but it's just a 9-minute excerpt, so I haven't listened to it again. But probably you should go to the actual sessions on the types of reason in order to, if you are seeking more specification. I mean, the reason seems to be that the word mujarrabat, so I don't follow this word at all. I know, we use it in Urdu, and it is derived from Arabic, but in this context it doesn't. Mujarrabat, if jarraba yujarrab tajriban mujarrabat, things experienced, that's fine, but that's not the word Imam was using there. And it's not just the word, the context is very important. The other words which are surrounding that word as well. So the context. So if you don't pay attention to the context and are more interested in distorting a word and then presumably following it in other books which may or may not belong to the same subject, we'll come to that. That doesn't seem to me a good method. If that's what you do, it's up to you what you do. But personally, that's not what I would do. I'll follow the context, and if I have a commentary like that of the Vedi, I'll follow it as well. And obviously, you follow other imams' books if there is need to. But yeah, and we are going to look at other books as well. Our plan is to look at his conception of rationality and his conception of knowledge in all his books. But Ihya al-Ulum is one of his last books, in which we find his mature thinking. So I'll always prefer or prioritize Ihya al-Ulum on other books. Okay. What else? The reason seems to be the word is not followed in other writings of Imam Ghazali, like Mihak al-Nazar and Ma'yar al-Ulum. Now, Ma'yar al-Ulum is basically a book on Aristotelian logic, and it has been a long time since I've seen the book, but as far as I remember, the book on logic in Maqasid al-Philosopher, the book on logic is either same as Ma'yar al-Ulum, or Ma'yar al-Ulum is a little bit more expensive than that, but they are basically the same books as far as I remember, and they are books in traditional logic, the logic which is studied in basically Aristotelian logic, and it's studied even to this day in our seminaries or madaris. And Imam Ghazali in turn sort of summarizes this book Ma'yar al-Ulum and part of Mihak al-Nazar as well in Al-Mustasfa, which is his book, is one of his last books, actually. It's much later books. Al-Mustasfa is a book in Usul al-Fiqh, and it is even it comes even, he wrote it after Ihya al-Ulum, actually. But it's a book on Usul al-Fiqh. But normally books in Usul al-Fiqh also contain introductions to logic. So basically, the introductory part of Al-Mustasfa sort of summarizes Ma'yar al-Ulum. And Imam Ghazali in Al-Mustasfa always refers back to Ma'yar al-Ulum, and I'm not sure Mihak al-Nazar as well, but Ma'yar al-Ulum for sure. And I've been reading Al-Mustasfa in recent times, so its discussions are, more or less in my mind. Okay, Mihak al-Nazar is a book on logic as well, but it comes after Ma'yar al-Ulum, and I've never actually studied it in any detail, so I should. It is said that this book, Mihak al-Nazar, sort of represent a turning point in Imam Ghazali's thinking in logic, and he started developing some sort of Islamic logic in there. So Mihak al-Nazar does contain topics in traditional logic, but there are topics from other Islamic sciences as well. Okay. But one thing which just this reminds me is that it is important to understand that different Islamic disciplines use the same terminology, same in terms of word, in different meaning and different contexts. So it's very important to realize that, otherwise it results in a lot of confusion. For example, there's a term tawatur. In the discipline of Ilm al-Hadith, Usul al-Hadith, this term tawatur, when you apply it to Hadith, is used in one specific meaning, which is different from tawatur, which is used in ulum al-qira'at and ilm al-tafsir and usul al-tafsir, because the sense of tawatur in al-Quran is totally different. The meaning and sense is totally different. So when you define tawatur in ulum al-Quran, that's totally different from tawatur in how you define it and understand it in usul al-hadith. And if you aren't able to differentiate this, you are going to make a lot of mistakes. Similarly, for example, more well-known example, or more as-sunnah. So a lot of people get into futile debates because they don't understand that sunnah might mean one thing in ulum al-hadith, another thing in usul al-fiqh, and yet another thing in fiqh, and finally another thing in ilm al-aqaid and ilm al-kalam. So it's not just obviously it was irrelevant here because but it just reminded me of this thing. So it's important to differentiate between the same words used in different meaning in different Islamic disciplines. Okay, to move on, then he goes on to say that by mujarabat, Ghazali means inductively generalized knowledge. Inductively generalized knowledge. And by contrast, in with hissiyat, probably he means mahsusat, that is sense experience, which refer to particular experience. Probably Dr. Zahid misunderstood all this because he thought contrast is always among contrary things or opposites. Because as far as I can see, life experience include what he is calling mujarabat and hissiyat. And if you are contrasting mujarabat and hissiyat, doesn't mean that they are opposites, because you can contrast am with khas. There's no problem with that. And life experience include sense experience of both types. How can you have life experience without sense experience? But life experience is more than sense experience. It's so that's why I said there. I don't know whether in this segment, but in a fuller video, that this third type of reason comes close to what Aristotle calls practical reason. Okay, and then the final line, and which sort of tells me why Dr. Zahid might have got this wrong. Okay, so the last line probably will tell us why he might have got what I said wrong. Because he said the video says that the third meaning, okay, also belongs to the first two types. So I'm just trying to understand Dr. Zahid's reasonings here. Since probably he hasn't listened to anything else, I'm sure I might have said that the third meaning also belonged to the first two types. Okay, and from that, Dr. Zahid concluded that since Imam said that the first two types are innate types, they are not acquired types, then he concluded that I must think that the third meaning is also innate. I think that's how he thought, implicitly or explicitly, consciously or unconsciously. Obviously implicitly, because he's not saying it. But this is obviously a crazy reading, because firstly, how can somebody in their right mind can say that life experience, which obviously we all acquire through our life, is innate and not acquired? I mean, I haven't listened to that excerpt or anything before answering this again, but it just seems ridiculous to attribute this to anyone. And I'm sure I never said that life experience is innate and it's not acquired. And I don't think I ever said that the third type and fourth type are not acquired. Dr. Zahid only inferred this through this strange reasoning, because I said that I don't remember how I would have said, but I might have said the third and fourth types also belong to the first and second type. I might have said that. From this, Dr. Zahid inferred that since Imam Ghazali said that the first two types are innate or bit-tab', that's why I must think that the third and fourth type are also innate. But he's assuming that that's the only classification. That was the only distinction we made, because Imam Ghazali's distinction is al-aql, innate and acquired. But we we obviously were reading Imam Ghazali to develop our thinking, not just to say what he said. I mean, there was no point of making doing all this if we had to say what Imam Ghazali said, which is obviously, you can read in Arabic. There are good English translation, and we have Urdu translation as well. So we also made other distinction. For example, as far as I remember, we made a distinction between reason as instrument, and a substantial conception of reason, for example. So probably, since I haven't, probably what I said was the third and fourth type belong to the first type, from the point of view of that the first two types are, instruments of human knowledge, and in the same way, the third and fourth type of reason is also instrument of human knowledge. We made other distinctions as well. For example, we made a lot of distinction about innate or bitaba, which obviously Imam Ghazali doesn't make explicitly. So that's the story of all this. So I don't know what else to say. And thank Dr. Zahid for his comments. Thank you.